Hi, everyone. I'm back for chapter two overview. And in this chapter, it's about inequality and capitalism. And I ask you first, what is the American dream? If you were to ask several of the people that you know, what is the American dream? Or what does the American dream mean to you? Everyone would likely have a different answer. Um, Similarly, if you asked most people, does an American dream exist? Does it even exist? Not only what is it, but does it even exist? Again, I think most people would have varying answers. And that's fine. We don't all have to agree. But it's interesting just to begin to understand the different ideas people have about what the American dream is and whether this is really, quote, the land of opportunity, as for probably many centuries, at least the last couple hundred centuries, people have thought about, or that has been the saying that comes to mind when many people think about the U.S. And certainly, there are people who are able to immigrate to the United States or to start from a background of poverty, say like Oprah Winfrey, and to achieve great things, for sure. Absolutely, that's possible. But the the author of the text wants you to really consider how we shouldn't forget that those people are very few in number, that for the vast majority of people, this system set up in the US doesn't really work as well for them. When you think, for example, about social mobility, which is discussed in this chapter, most people believe that it will be possible for them to achieve upward social mobility, right? Because I'm going to focus on upward social mobility because I really don't think that there are a whole lot of people out there who are in the 1% or even the upper class who are thinking, hey, I can't wait till I squander all my money, I lose it all, and then I can be down there with the poor or the working class. I don't really think there are many people who are looking for downward social mobility. So when we think about social mobility, we generally think about upward social mobility. In fact, many of you are likely in school right now, not so much because you just love learning, right? You get all excited when the semester is going to start, etc. Oh, you look forward to my videos each week. That's probably not why most of you are in school or in college. It's very likely that most of you, or many of you at least, are in school for the same reason that I was. You came to believe that by getting an education, you could perhaps have a better life than the one that you were born into, a better social class than the one into which you were born, that you could perhaps live a little bit better than the circumstances into which you were born. At least that's why I went to school. I'm number 7 out of 9 children, and my parents were immigrants from Mexico. And so for me, going to college was my ticket out of the small, very poor town that I grew up in, and it worked. Having said that, I do have 3 degrees, and yet I am not one of the 1%ers. I've done everything society says I should do, but I guess my big mistake was, instead of practicing law and making lots and lots of money, I decided I wanted to teach instead. And I made decent money, but not as much money as I would have if I had practiced law. So maybe it is my fault in the end. I don't know. I'll let you ponder that. Because for me, it was the right decision. But there are people maybe who would look at me and think, it's your fault. You could be one of the 1%ers if you just practice law. So when we think of social mobility, we tend to, we believe that all these opportunities are out there, as I said, the land of opportunity, and that it's possible for any of us. But if you look at the chart on page 36 in the text, what you see is that the United States is a country which has a fairly high ranking in terms of how much your family's situation has or plays a role in your ability to achieve social mobility. In essence, Some academic scholars have said that there's a legacy of wealth in the United States. That is, that parents pass their wealth on to their children, and parents living in poverty tend to pass that poverty on to their children. And so I want you to think, for example, maybe you haven't heard much about it because you're up in Northern California, many of you, but here in Southern California, there's been a great focus on a case that came to light in March of 2019. And a gentleman by the name of Rick Singer was indicted on numerous federal felony counts. It turned out that this guy ran a college placement business service. And, those exist. They're companies that offer services to help get your kid into a good college. His, of course, on the face of it, appeared legitimate, and there were some legitimate things he did to help kids get into school. But for the wealthy, very wealthy parents, he created this is his term, he called it this. He said, lots of noise out there. He said, I created a side door for college admissions for the wealthy. Because most of you, well, some of you at least, will know about legacies. Legacies are an ages old way of parents being able to get their children into elite schools simply because the parents went to that school themselves, or a very close relative, a grandmother, grandfather, aunt, or uncle. Typically, it has to be within the first degree of relationship. It can't be your great grandmother's father's second wife, 3 generations removed. It's got to be it's in that first degree of relationship. And so, for example, I went to Stanford, and there were many students that I knew. In fact, that is where I learned about legacies, was during my first year at Stanford. Many of the people in my residence hall were legacies. That is, they had parents and grandparents who had attended Stanford. In fact, many of them knew they were going to go to Stanford. They'd been wearing Stanford sweatshirts since they were babies. They never really had to decide where they were going to go to college. It was just understood that Stanford was where they were going to go to college. And when you think about the tremendous benefit that parents are able to pass on to their children through the legacy programs, it really seems quite unfair, because it's really kids riding in on the coattails of their parents. And state schools do it too, by the way. UCLA does it. Private schools do it. It's been going on for a long time, this idea of legacies. And so Rick Singer said, well, you can either be a legacy, or you can, your parents can give a lot of money to an institution to endow a chairship, or to help, build some new building on campus, start a new program, etc. Or they can come through the side door, which is what he said he created. And so, again, if you haven't heard about this case, it involved wealthy parents, some of them entertainment celebrities like Felicity Huffman, for example, Lloyd Loughlin, who was in Full House in the 80s. You may not even know who she is, but several other well-known people who essentially bought their child's way into places like USC. Apparently, there are quite a few cases where people were admitted to USC as athletes when, in fact, they never played the sport at all. And in other instances, people paid for their children's SAT scores to be corrected or changed, the answers to be changed before they were sent for scoring. He got caught. Rick Singer got caught. A lot of these parents got caught. And so Felicity Huffman, for example, an actor who's made a number of movies, and her husband, William Macy, also made a number of movies. Felicity Huffman was charged with fraud, and she pleaded guilty. and she was just sentenced to 14 days. Just this week, it was on Friday, she appeared in a Boston courthouse, and the sentence of 14 days was imposed by the judge. That caused many people to ask the question, is that really fair? What would happen to somebody who committed fraud by writing a contract, taking the money and then never rendering the service? Maybe an attorney who says, yes, I'll represent you in immigration court, takes your money, you sign a contract, takes your money, and then doesn't show up. How much time would that person serve? Or how much time would a contractor serve who said, give me half of the $20,000 it's going to take to build your room addition, and then never shows up? Wouldn't those people serve more time? And so I'll leave you to ponder that one. But clearly, wealth, it pays to be wealthy in the United States. Also, there's a discussion about the tax system. And I posted an article in the module for this week. It was an opinion piece that a very well-known investor by the name of Warren Buffett wrote. It was an open letter to the editor. And Warren Buffett wrote this letter some time ago, I think it was a good 5 or 6 years ago, about the tax system in the United States. And he points out that he pays far less in taxes than his administrative assistant. And it's all because his wealth all comes pretty much from his investments. And capital gains are taxed at 15% in the United States. And so for someone like me, I typically pay 20% in taxes overall. That means then that maybe Mitt Romney, who has way more billions than I could ever even hope to have, is paying about 12 to 13% typically. And that doesn't really seem very fair to me because I go to work. I mean, I work for a living. I don't just get to let my money make all my money for me. But that's how you get wealthy in the United States. You allow your money to work for you, which many would argue is a smart way. And it is, if you have the money to make it work for you. That's the loophole. Got to have the money to make it work for you. So there is also a discussion in the text about the Europeans and how they typically pay very high taxes. In fact, I was talking to a guy from Norway a while back. He was an engineer and he paid 55% of his income in taxes. However, and I know that seems really crazy and ridiculous, but he went to school for free. He had a bachelor's and a master's in engineering. He gets free health care. He doesn't have to pay for that. When he retires, he will get a pension, like a real pension, not Social Security, which is not enough for anybody to live on in this country, but a real pension. And he also gets family leave for up to a year as a male, and it's at full pay. Here in the United States, you can take up to a year to care for yourself, a sick person in your family, or a new child, but you don't get paid. And so once your sick leave or your vacation time runs out, you're not going to get paid. And so not a whole lot of people take a whole year of family medical leave. Although in European countries, people typically do, because not only are their jobs safe, but they also get full pay. And by the way, in many European countries, mothers can stay home for up to 2 years with a newborn child, and fathers can stay home for up to 1 year. And people do take the time because they can. It's paid. Also, in many of these European countries, if you have a newborn baby, the government will send someone around to help you with your child, typically for 4 hours a day, so that you can that person will take care of your child. This is a person paid by the government in that country, and you can go do shopping, you can go get your nails done, go get your hair cut, get a massage, whatever it is you need to do during that time, you can go off and do that knowing your child will be taken care of. And I uploaded a clip in the module as well. It's a clip from a movie by Michael Moore about living in France. and the benefits that people have there. Yes, they pay high taxes, but they get a lot back compared to what we get back for the taxes that we pay. At least I think so. But it's up to you. Check it out and see what you think. Also, in European countries, they tend to view healthcare as a right. That is, everybody gets it. In fact, I had a student a few years ago who had gone to England, Britain, Great Britain, and she was there for about a month traveling around with her friend, doing the typical backpack thing. And she got very ill. She was rushed to the hospital, and it turned out that she had a heart condition that she didn't know she had. She was very, very concerned about the cost um, that she would be liable for because she's an American and doesn't have health care insurance. And she was assured by the doctor who cared for her while she was in London in a hospital that even though she was not a British citizen, she would not be charged. Not for the ambulance, not for the health care, not for the hospital stay, that she would not be charged, which she was shocked at, she said, because that would not happen here. If you're visiting here from another country, you will get a bill. We'll treat you, we'll get you stable, but that's about it. And then you'll get a big bill for it. So they view it as a privilege, as a right for everybody, even if you're only vacationing, they view it as a right. Here in the US, of course, I think I'd make the argument that we tend to view it as a privilege because if you can afford it, then you can buy some of the best healthcare out there. But if you can't, then you have to resort to Medi-Cal, which is for people who live under a certain level, typically at the poverty line or slightly above. Or perhaps you go without because you can't afford it or you're working for an employer that doesn't provide it. There are a lot of people in the United States who don't have access to health care. And so I think my own personal feeling, and again, you don't have to agree with me, but I think that we need to change how we think about healthcare and really start thinking about it as a right, not a privilege. There's also some discussion about homelessness in the chapter, and here in Southern California, where I live near LA. Homelessness is a huge problem, not only in the city of LA, but in many of the surrounding communities. And we haven't figured out a way to deal with it, really. Lots of things are being tried, but there's still a lot of people who are homeless. And so it's really quite a problem. Also, I want you to consider, is it criminal to sleep on the street? Some cities have ordinances that you can't be on the sidewalk during certain hours. Other cities have local ordinances, local laws that stipulate you can't park on the street between 10 p.m. and say 5 a.m. or something like that, which means then that if you're parked on the street and you're sleeping in your car, you could be told to move. And so even sleeping in your car can be challenging if you live in a city where that is the case. So certainly homelessness is a very much an issue of inequality in the United States. And in such a wealthy country, you have to wonder, why do we have so many homeless people? And also, I want you to think about education and think about a recent National Public Radio story that I was hearing regarding college students. And this is not just college students in California. This is college students across the United States, particularly first-generation college students who are having difficulty providing themselves 3 meals a day. Unfortunately, some students are going to classes hungry because they can't afford to eat 3 meals a day. And so many campuses have begun to provide what might be called food banks on campus. Some, if it's not the whole college doing it, there are some departments that may be doing it, making available, packaged items, cheese and crackers, those little packages, plastic packages with fake cheese and crackers, or granola bars, the things that are non-perishable, so that at least a student could have something to eat before going to class, because of course it is very difficult to concentrate when you're hungry. I know it is for me at least. You'll have an opportunity to really think about the issues of inequality and capitalism, and how capitalism plays a role in inequality. And of course, this text is written really much more from a critical constructionist approach or a conflict theory approach. So you may not disagree with everything in the chapter, and that's okay. I just want you to consider some of the arguments that the author makes. And ultimately, you may not agree with the author or with me, and that's fine. But just keeping an open mind is all I ask. All right, well, that's it. I will see you for Chapter 3 overview next week. Bye.